In the warm glow of the red safe light, where time seems to stand still and the world outside ceases to exist, that's where our story begins. A vintage photo lab nestled in the corner of our university's arts building became the unlikely stage for a romance that developed as gradually and beautifully as the photographs we created there. I still remember the first time I walked into that darkroom, nervous about my failing photography project, completely unaware that I was about to meet someone who would change everything. My name is Alex, and I've always been drawn to photography. The way a single frame can capture an entire story, the magic of watching an image appear on blank paper in the developer tray. But despite my passion, I was struggling with my final project for advanced film photography. My professor had suggested I seek help at the university's photo lab, a place I'd avoided due to my own stubborn independence. Let me tell you why this matters. Sometimes the places we resist going become the very spaces where our lives transform in ways we never imagined. The lab was managed by Jamie, a graduate student whose reputation preceded him. Everyone in the photography department spoke of his technical brilliance, his uncanny ability to rescue hopeless negatives, and his somewhat mysterious nature. He rarely attended department socials, preferring the solitude of the darkroom to crowds of chattering students. What no one mentioned was his smile, the kind that starts in the eyes before it reaches the lips, or the way he moved through the darkroom with a dancer's grace, as if the space was an extension of himself. Our first meeting was brief and professional. I explained my project, a series exploring urban isolation, and how my negatives weren't capturing the contrast I envisioned. Jamie listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that made me reconsider my approach. "The problem isn't your technique," he said after examining my negatives. "It's that you're keeping too much distance from your subjects." His words weren't just about photography. They somehow pierced through to something deeper, a truth about how I moved through the world, always observing, rarely participating. That's when I realized this might be more than just technical assistance. Jamie offered to help me rework my project, suggesting I come back after hours when the lab was quieter. "The darkroom reveals itself differently when you're not rushing," he explained. "Photography isn't just about seeing, it's about patience, about waiting for the image to tell you what it needs." There was something in the way he spoke about photography that made me want to understand not just the process, but the person behind these insights. I found myself looking forward to our session with an intensity that surprised me. The darkroom is a unique environment, unlike any other creative space. When you step inside and the door closes behind you, the outside world disappears. The gentle hum of the ventilation system, the faint scent of chemicals, developer, stop bath, fixer, creating a cocktail that becomes oddly comforting over time. The red safe light casts everything in a warm, otherworldly glow, transforming familiar features into something new and intriguing. It's intimate by necessity. Spaces are tight, voices naturally lower, and there's an unspoken choreography as you move around each other, careful not to disturb works in progress. Let me explain why this environment matters so much to our story. The darkroom creates a peculiar kind of intimacy. Under normal circumstances, two people getting to know each other might maintain comfortable distances, rely on clear visibility to read expressions, or have the distractions of the outside world to fill awkward silences. The darkroom strips away these buffers. You work closely together, sometimes your hands accidentally touching in the developer tray. You become attuned to the sound of each other's breathing, the subtle shifts in movement. Conversations flow differently in this space, often becoming more honest, more revealing. The darkness doesn't hide, paradoxically, it reveals. When I returned for our after-hours session, Jamie was already there, his silhouette outlined by the red glow as he organized chemicals in trays. "I thought we'd start from scratch," he said, helping me load my film onto the development reel. This process requires complete darkness, and as he guided my hands through the motions, I became intensely aware of his proximity, the gentle pressure of his fingers directing mine, his voice close to my ear explaining each step. "Feel the edge of the film," he murmured. "Let it guide itself onto the reel. Don't force it." There was something mesmerizing about learning through touch rather than sight, about placing trust in another person's guidance. As we worked together over the following weeks, a routine developed. I would arrive with new negatives, and Jamie would help me coax the best prints from them. Our conversations started professionally, discussions of exposure times, contrast filters, dodging and burning techniques, but gradually expanded into personal territory. He told me about growing up in a small town where his interest in photography marked him as different, how the darkroom became his sanctuary. I shared stories of my own creative struggles, my fear of vulnerability, both in art and in life. The best photographs, Jamie once said while we watched an image slowly appear in the developer, are the ones where the photographer has risked something of themselves. The darkroom became our shared secret, a place where time operated differently. Sometimes we'd work in comfortable silence, the only sounds the timer ticking and water running in the wash basin. Other times, protected by the red light and chemical scents, we'd exchange confidences that might have been impossible in the harsh clarity of daylight. Jamie revealed his frustration with the commercial work he did to fund his studies, how he feared losing his artistic voice. I admitted my own anxieties about the future, about making art that mattered. What if I'm just pretending to be a photographer? I asked one night. Jamie's response was to pull one of my prints from the drying rack, a shadowy figure framed in a narrow alleyway. "Does this look like pretending to you?" he asked. "Because I see someone with a distinct perspective, someone who's starting to take risks." You might wonder how two people can develop feelings in such an unusual setting, surrounded by chemicals and equipment. But I've come to believe that creative collaboration is one of the most intimate forms of connection. When you work alongside someone in creating something meaningful, you see parts of them that casual interaction never reveals. Their process, their frustrations, their moments of inspiration. Jamie and I were not just developing photographs. We were developing an understanding of each other that went beyond surface impressions. The tension between us built gradually, like an image slowly gaining definition in the developer tray. It was in the way Jamie would stand slightly closer than necessary when demonstrating a technique. It was in my lingering glances when he was absorbed in his work, the strong line of his profile in the red light. It was in our conversations that stretched hours beyond what the task required, neither of us willing to be the first to suggest ending the session. We were developing a language of subtle gestures and shared glances, a private communication that existed alongside our spoken words. One evening, about a month into our collaboration, I arrived to find Jamie working on his own project, a series of portraits that he'd been reluctant to show anyone. "I'd like your opinion," he said, surprising me with this new level of trust. The photographs were striking, close-up portraits of various people, each image capturing a moment of unguarded emotion. "These are incredible," I said honestly. "You can feel the connection between you and your subjects." Jamie looked at me for a long moment. "That's what's been missing from your work," he said quietly. "That connection. You're always keeping a safe distance." His words hit home in a way I wasn't prepared for. My photography project had improved technically under his guidance, but he was right. I was still shooting from a distance, afraid to truly engage with my subjects. "How do I change that?" I asked. Jamie considered this, then suggested something unexpected. "Let me photograph you," he said. "Not to exhibit, just as an exercise. To show you what it feels like to be on both sides of the camera." I hesitated, feeling suddenly vulnerable. Being the observer was comfortable, being observed was not. But something about the safety of the darkroom, about Jamie's presence, made me nod in agreement. "Okay," I said, "but only if I can photograph you too." He smiled, that smile that transformed his usually serious face, and agreed. The next evening was different from our previous sessions. We took turns with the camera, at first self-conscious and awkward, but gradually relaxing into the process. Jamie was a patient subject, allowing me to direct him, and a thoughtful photographer, helping me feel at ease when it was my turn before the lens. "Don't pose," he advised. "Just be in the moment with me." The experience was strangely intimate. This mutual observation, this shared vulnerability. When we developed the films later that night, I was startled by what we'd captured, not just physical likenesses, but something of our essential selves, something honest and unguarded. As we hung the prints to dry, standing close in the narrow space, Jamie pointed to one of the photographs I'd taken of him. In it, he was looking directly at the camera, his expression open and undefended. "You see," he said softly, "this is what happens when you stop keeping a safe distance." His words hung in the air between us, laden with meaning beyond photography. I looked up to find him watching me, his eyes asking a question I suddenly knew the answer to. What happened next unfolded with the dreamlike quality that the darkroom often induces. Jamie reached out, his hand gently touching my cheek, giving me every opportunity to step away. But I didn't want to keep a safe distance anymore. I moved closer instead. "Alex," he whispered, my name sounding different in his voice, weighted with feeling. Time seemed to slow as he leaned in, hesitating just a breath away. In that moment of suspension, the red light cast everything in a warm glow, transforming the ordinary into something magical, something significant. When our lips finally met, it felt like the culmination of 1,000 small moments leading to this one. The kiss was gentle at first, a question being asked and answered, then deepening with newfound certainty. Jamie's hand moved from my cheek to the back of my neck, drawing me closer. The red light framed us in its soft glow, turning this private moment into something that felt like a scene from a film. Except it was real, it was happening, and everything was changing. Let me tell you why this moment mattered so much. It wasn't just a first kiss. It was a threshold crossed, from observation to participation, from keeping safe distances to risking closeness. In photography terms, it was like moving from a wide-angle lens to an intimate portrait, revealing details previously unseen. The darkroom, with its peculiar combination of privacy and exposure, had become the perfect setting for this revelation. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jamie smiled with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. The honesty in his voice made me laugh softly, relieving the intensity of the moment. "Why didn't you?" I asked. He shrugged, suddenly boyish despite his usual confidence. "The same reason your photographs were keeping a safe distance," he said. "Fear of rejection, I guess." That night marked a shift in our relationship, both personal and creative. We continued working together on my project, but there was a new dimension to our collaboration. The boundaries between teacher and student, between friends and something more, had blurred into something undefined but undeniably precious. Our conversations became even more open, touching on subjects we'd previously avoided: our families, our past relationships, our hopes for the future. Jamie told me about his coming-out experience in his conservative hometown, how photography had become both his escape and his voice when words failed. I shared my own journey of self-acceptance, the gradual recognition of my identity that had often felt like watching an image slowly develop, details emerging from blankness. We discovered shared experiences and significant differences, each revelation bringing us closer. The impact on our creative work was profound. My photography project evolved from distant observations of urban isolation to more engaged portraits that told stories of connection amidst alienation. Jamie's own work gained a new emotional resonance that his technical perfection had sometimes obscured. We were influencing each other, challenging each other, inspiring new directions neither of us might have explored alone. Of course, reality eventually intruded on our darkroom idol. The end of the semester approached, bringing with it exhibition deadlines and final reviews. We had to navigate the transition from the private space we'd created to the public world of the university. Would our connection survive exposure to normal lighting, to the everyday pressures of academic life, to the curious eyes of classmates and faculty? The first time Jamie casually took my hand as we walked across campus together, I felt a momentary panic. Not because I was ashamed, never that, but because this relationship had developed in such an insulated environment. Would it make sense outside the darkroom? Jamie sensed my hesitation and loosened his grip, giving me the option to pull away. Instead, I tightened my hold on his hand, making a choice that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. Our relationship wasn't without complications. Jamie was a graduate assistant, not technically my teacher, but still in a position of some authority within the department. We had to navigate these boundaries carefully, ensuring our personal relationship didn't compromise either of our academic positions. There were raised eyebrows from some faculty members, curious questions from classmates, the occasional awkward moment when someone would reference our relationship before we'd defined it ourselves. But these challenges only strengthened what we were building. We had honest conversations about expectations and boundaries, about how to balance our creative collaboration with our personal connection. "I don't want to influence your work too much," Jamie said one evening as we discussed my exhibition pieces. Your voice is unique. I never want to overshadow that. His respect for my artistic independence, even as our personal lives intertwined, meant everything to me. As the semester drew to a close, my final project was selected for the university's annual exhibition, a series that had evolved dramatically from my initial concept, thanks in no small part to Jamie's influence. The night of the opening, standing beside my displayed work, I watched Jamie across the gallery, engaged in conversation with one of the professors. He caught my eye and smiled, that same smile that had first captivated me in the red glow of the darkroom. In that moment, I realized how far we'd both come from our first meeting. After the exhibition, when the crowds had dispersed and we were helping to clean up the gallery, Jamie pulled me aside. I have something for you, he said, handing me a small package wrapped in dark paper. Inside was a framed print, the photograph I'd taken of him during our portrait session, the one he'd pointed to just before our first kiss. Alongside it was a new image I hadn't seen before, the two of us in the darkroom, captured by the automatic timer on his camera, caught in a moment of shared concentration over a developing tray. The red light bathed us in its glow, our profiles illuminated, leaning toward each other in a way that suggested intimacy, even though we weren't touching. This is how I'll always remember the beginning, Jamie said softly. Both of us in that red light, creating something together. The thoughtfulness of the gift moved me deeply. It wasn't just a memento. It was a recognition of our story, of how the darkroom had framed not just our first kiss, but the development of something profound between us. As we approach graduation, Jamie and I are making plans. He's been offered a position at a prestigious gallery in the city, and I've secured a photojournalism internship with a local magazine. We've found a small apartment with enough space for a modest darkroom of our own, a continuation of the environment where we first connected. Our relationship continues to develop, each day revealing new aspects, new challenges, new joys. Looking back, I'm struck by how perfectly the darkroom metaphor applies to love. Both require patience, attention to detail, and a willingness to work with what emerges, not always what you expected, but often something more interesting than you planned. Both involve a certain faith in the unseen, a trust in the process even when the outcome isn't yet visible. And both transform through careful attention, through the application of time and care. That first kiss in the red light of the darkroom was just the beginning of our story, the initial exposure, you might say. The image of who we are together continues to develop, gaining definition and depth with each passing day. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't swallowed my pride and sought help with my struggling project, if Jamie hadn't offered those after-hours sessions, if the unique alchemy of the darkroom hadn't worked its magic on us both. But then I remember something Jamie often says about photography. There are no accidents in the darkroom, only opportunities recognized or missed. Perhaps it's the same with love. Perhaps we were just two people ready to recognize the opportunity when it presented itself, brave enough to step out of our safe distances and into the revealing light of connection. So if you find yourself in a darkroom someday, literal or metaphorical, pay attention to what develops there. Sometimes, in the most unexpected places, under the most unusual light, you discover images of possibilities you never imagined. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone to share the process with, someone whose presence transforms not just your art, but your understanding of yourself. Someone who pulls you into the red light and shows you that the most beautiful developments often happen in the spaces where we are brave enough to see and be seen. Total _char_count, 17,921.